Are you starting to create your own training load monitoring dashboard? In this week's Power BI for Sport tutorial, I'll show you how to create one with Power BI. A load monitoring dashboard has become incredibly important in international and professional sport, and there's an extensive amount of research showing the benefits of properly structured training load. As sports scientists, we love to quantify these values, and so having a tool that shows us how we're comparing to what we had planned is incredibly important. So let's get going and start creating our very own training load monitoring dashboard in Power BI. And if you haven't already, please make sure you hit like and subscribe below so you are notified of all future videos. Alright guys, so I've already into my Power BI workbook and I have created or loaded in some data already. So let's just take a quick look. We'll start at the top. I have an athlete table with just our athletes, their positions, and some game normative data for later. I have a date table, which I've created off a function for a table. You can do this by going to Home while you're in the Data tab and clicking New Table. And Calendar will just create you a calendar between those two dates that you choose. I have a positions table and a training load table. And then my relationships are very simple. I've just got the date from my date table related to my date and training load, my athlete and my athlete table to athlete and training load, and then position to position from my positions to athletes table. So to get started, what we're going to do is we're just going to create a simple graph, and this is going to be used to show our training load for total distance first over time, and we'll show this against a value of 7 and then 28, and then we can use a slicer, which I'll add in first to change between players. Once we have our acute and chronic loads, what we can do is we can create an acute chronic workload ratio to add into our graph. So let's just add this first. We'll create a drop down and then let's just format it a little bit. We'll call it a player selector. And then we'll just create the text a bit bigger. We'll change our items to black so they stand out a little bit more. Turn off our slicer header and we'll make it a single select. Alright, so there is our athlete 1's total distance from week to week over time, day to day. So let's go into external tools and we'll click tabular editor and we'll start creating our first measure. So we'll go into training load, create new measure, and this one is just going to be TD underscore 7 day. And we're going to add that to a display table. I always put an underscore first, and we'll just call it, we'll go without the second underscore 7 day. And all this is going to be is a calculate function, if I can spell calculate properly. And we're just going to sum total distance here. And then we're going to use dates and period. And first of all, we just need to find our date column from our date table. And then we're going to use last date here. Again, the date table, date column. We're going to go -7 for our period, and then we're going to use day for period type. And then we can use that and format it. And then while we're here, we'll go really simple. We'll copy that, and we're going to create another measure, but this time for our 28-day value. So let's go TD underscore 28 day. We'll just add in our formula there. We'll call this a 28-day display folder, and then all we need to do is change our 7 to 28, and then at the bottom divide by 4 so we have a weekly value. So we can save for both of those. And now we have them both in our training load table, so let's add them here. So we're going to add them to line values. So here's our 7-day value. As you can see, at one point he got up to, or our athlete, he or she got up to about 60k, and they've dropped off quite dramatically each day. If we add in our 28-day value, this will smooth it out quite a lot. And you can see there by the end of preseason, which I'm assuming is about here, they were at about 50k a week, which then starts to level off as the season begins. So now that we have that, we can create our acute chronic ratio. So let's just add a new measure, and we're going to call it TD, ACWR, and then we'll add that to a display folder for ACWR. And all this needs to be is acute divided by chronic. Simple as that. If we were to remove both of these here, we can add this into this, and here is our acute chronic. As always, using this type of coupled method, you will find that at first it's about 4, and it will sit around 4 until you've got at least a week's worth of data, and then it will start to level down. And then you'll have your value within 4 weeks of the data starting, and then you'll see it over time gradually appearing. So what I tend to do is, if I was to keep this, I would turn my secondary axis here. So I do have show secondary here. I would change the end to being probably about 3, and I would have my bottom end at 0. I'm not too bothered at first if it's at 4, because that's not overly important. It starts to be through here where you're wanting to see if it's too high or not. If you want to make that even more, you can change that down to being 2, for example. And then you'll get more of the variation of your acute chronic. So if we're going to use that, let's go away and we'll recreate a few measures. So what we can do on Tabular Editor is we can just duplicate our measures. So what we can do here is we can call this one player load, and what you'll find with player load is it does end up being very similar to total distance most of the time. So you can either choose one or the other, or use both of them. That's completely up to you. I'm also going to use here band 5 in isolation. And so I'm going to call this, change this here to band 5 distance. And then the last one I'm going to do is create one for band 7 as well. Alright, so we've got all of those. Let's do the same thing here for our 28-day value. So player load, change this to player load. Oops, didn't mean to hit enter on that one. And then duplicate, and we're going to change this one to band 5. And while I'm here, I'll just duplicate that to band 7 as well, sorry. So we will go and then band 5 distance. Alright, so those are all okay, and then let's just create our acute chronic ratios as well. And all they need to be then is just changing our front 2 letters to match our other measures that we had. So B5 to the same thing. Oh, that should be B7. Oops. I will change that in a second. If you do happen to make that mistake, you can change it down here as well on Tabular Editor. So we have band 5 as well, B5, B5, save. Okay. So now what I can do is I can copy that figure, and then I can change my values here. So if I add player load, and then change my player load acute chronic. There we go. So as you can see here, it looks very similar to what we had for total distance. Most people will generally use very similar or use them interchangeably, and that's something that's quite easy to do, as you will find there is quite a good relationship between the two. But that tends to be the same for every player. But then there is differences between players, and that's something that you need to be aware of when using player load. And then the last one is band 7 here. Oops. Need to add band 7 distance column. There we go. Alright, so easily there you've got your values. So now if we were to, what I tend to do is try to have these, you can do is align vertically, so they're nicely spread out. But what I tend to do as well is try and keep them all the same height. So if we went, for example, 200, we might actually need to go less than that because of the height. Just do that. And then the width can stay the same. So let's go to 1200. And then again, we can just make sure they are properly distributed. There we go. So then now you can go about just reformatting these. So you can label them if you want to. For example, I would go total distance and ACWR by day. You can do that here, or you can create a background that will add in a title on the side. That's up to you. If you don't want the title, what you can do is just use your legend to help that. I tend to just add that in the middle. You can change the size of your text. If it's saying you can't, turn off responsive, and you can make it a bit bigger. Make sure it's black as well. And then you'll have it. So now you could turn those there as well, or change those, or your title for your axis. So let's just do the same thing here, and we'll keep legend, go top and center, turn off responsive, change this to 12. There we go. What are we doing here? Turn off title, legend, top and center, black, turn off responsive, 12. Okay, and then last one, let's turn off our title. Legend goes top and center, changes to black, and we make it 12. Alright, so there you have the start of a training load tool. You can change your athlete and see over time. What you can also do is we can add in a second slicer on the side here, and we will add our date into this one. As my dates are in the past, you're not going to be able to use a relative slicer here. But that is something I would normally do, and I would advise you to doing in a continuous, more of a continuous type monitoring tool. We'll call this date selector as well. Go center. So if you're using this as it happens, you'll be able to change this. Sorry if I left this here. Change this to relative date. You'll see if I do this, if I go last month, everything will disappear. If I go year, everything comes back again. You can use this to show you just the last 6 weeks or the last 8 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever you think is valuable for you. For me, what I'm going to do is just a between, and what I can do is just change this here to, say, the start of April. So there you go, you've got some values. What you can do as well is you can add dud labels, but it does start to make it quite messy. So what you could do is you could add in a straight line to show where sort of good and bad is, or you could change your line to being just shapes if you have that possibility, just showing your marker. You can turn off your line by just getting rid of the stroke, and then you can conditionally format your marker to show where a value is above or below. So what we will do is we'll go and do that in our next video. But the last thing I was going to show you is you can use a card on the side just to add in some important information. So for example, if you're really interested in knowing a player's chronic load and how they're doing, you can use the card to show that. So if we just change our data labels to none, have 0 decimal places, and then we will just change the size of our text. I want this to go down to about 25. And then we can show this on the side to have a really quick view of where a player is sitting acute chronic. You would be able to create a measure to then say, are they above or below what they have done within the season? Are they sitting a good chronic load that you have seen over time where you think a player should be at? There's a lot of things you can add some context to these cards as well. So what we'll do is we'll go away, and in the next video we'll add some more cards on the side here. We'll conditionally format our values so that when a value is above a certain acute chronic, it'll highlight in that color or change to that color, so you get a sense of where warning or in the red a player might be. And we'll add a few other things onto this page and make it a little bit nicer, and then we'll move forward on to some other aspects of what you might want to use in a training load monitoring dashboard. So if you've liked this video, please make sure you hit like and subscribe below, and I hope to see you next time where we will continue to power performance through data. Thank you.